Module 6. Hi, Joe Cerrone. We're going to create this 3D assembly. What I've done is I've already gone through and given you the base geometry for that in Module 6. And so if you go to Module 6 and then you come down to this drawing file, you can download it and open it. And so what I've given you is the title block, and then I've given you the two-dimensional geometry, because this exercise is really a very symmetrical exercise which uses the same geometry. We just extrude it up for the top assembly piece and down for the bottom piece. And so what we'll do then is we'll switch over to model space, and then we'll grab a top view, and I'm still in my master drawing, so let me go and switch over to the drawing. Here we go. So we'll go to model space, and we'll just pan and zoom to take a look at that. And so basically what we have is a circular shape with a bolt hole pattern. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to copy it 2 times. I'm going to select the base point, and then I'm going to drop a part off right here, and then I'm going to go drop another one off here. Now I'll hit escape. So I took the one and I copied it twice. I'm going to keep this one for the 2D geometry, and then this one I'm going to turn into 3D. Okay, I don't need the dimensions, so I'm going to delete those. I don't need the center line. All right, so to model this, what we're going to do then is we're going to switch over to the 3D modeling interface. And I've already got it on there, so I'll switch to the 2D so you can see that, and then I'll switch over to 3D. And so what 3D modeling does is it gives you a different menu set to work from. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put the bolts onto a layer, and we're going to turn that layer off. And so I'm going to go to the layer command. I'm just going to type it, L-A-Y-E-R. I have a difficult time between interfaces finding things like layers and buttons. And if you type the commands, it works very quickly. So on the layer command, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to call it nuts dash bolts. And I'm going to make the color for that. I'll make it purple. And I'm going to give these a line weight of 0.5. And then I'm going to put that geometry on that nuts and bolts layer. Now if I turn that layer off, you'll see the items will disappear when I do it. And so I'll go and I'll click on the geometry for one of the nuts or bolts, and then I'll put it on that layer. And so here's my layer, and I'll put it on my nuts and bolts layer, and it'll disappear. If I turn that layer back on, you'll see the geometry. And the reason I'm doing it this way is it's much quicker to use a press pull command than it is to use an extrude command. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go and put these on that layer. I can just click on them with grips. And then I'll go over here and I'll put it on the nuts and bolts layer, and I'll close it. And I'll do the same for the other ones. You don't have to do them all at once. You can do some of them at a time. And you'll notice they'll disappear as I do them, because I've turned the light bulb off on the nuts and bolts layer. And so by using layers, it helps you clarify what you're working on without having so much geometry. And I've got one more left. Okay, now that we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to press pull this part. And so I'm going to switch over to layer object. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my viewing angle to a southeast isometric. And I'll zoom in on it. And then what I'll do is I'll press pull this down 0.12, which is on the dimensions. And so I say press pull, hover, click, push down, 0.12, enter. And then if I want to, I can verify this. I'm going to hit escape or right click by going to conceptual. And you can see it pressed and pulled the geometry. And now if I want to pull this up, I can pull it up in the other direction, and it's going to be (1.75), which is the dimension of 1.63 plus 0.120. So I'll say press pull, I'll hover, click, I'll pull that up, 1.75, enter. I'll hit escape. And now you'll notice that these two pieces now have been modeled, but they're separate. I can say move, and I can separate them. So I'm going to hit escape here, or undo. So what we want to do is to create a Boolean property called union. And so what I'll do is I'll say union, and then I'll select this geometry and this geometry, and I'll hit enter. And what that'll do is it'll fuse them together. So now if I try to move it, it'll treat them all as one piece. And so if I say move, select it. It does leave the initial geometry underneath it, which is really pretty cool because we can use that instead of making a copy, but at this point we'll leave it the way it is. So I'm going to undo that. Okay, so that's how we would do the top part of it. And then what I want to do is I want to turn on the layer for the nuts and bolts. And I'm going to go out of conceptual to 2D wireframe. And I'm going to need to move this other geometry up. And so I'm going to toggle over and I'm going to switch to my nuts and bolts layer, click on it, and then I'm going to turn off my object layer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the nuts and bolts and I'm going to move them up. So now that we've modeled this component, what we're going to do is we're going to model the bolts that go above it. And so I'm going to go and change from conceptual to 2D wireframe. And then I've turned on the nuts and bolts layer. And so if you turn off the nuts and bolts layer, and then if I turn it back on, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up in the Z-axis. And so I'm going to use the 3D move command. So I'll say 3D move, and I'll select this inside circle. I'll hit enter. Then I can grab the rocket, and I can just drag that up. And I'm going to say I'll move that up 3 inches. And then I'll do the same for the other geometry around here. So I can say 3D move. hit enter, grab the rocket, and then you can either bring it up in O snap, you can see it, object snaps to the center, or I can just type in 3 and it does the same thing. So one more time, 3D move. We can go and grab this circle right here, hit enter, grab the rocket, push it up, type 3, enter. And then do the same for the geometry around it. 3D move, build your selection set. And if you grab something like I did here where I have the wrong one, hold shift and unselect it. So now that I have the geometry that I want to move, I hit enter, grab the rocket, and then I go 3, enter. And for some reason it doesn't seem to want to grab that other geometry, so I'll just do it again. 3D move. Enter, grab the rocket, 3, enter. Now you can take the view cube and you can spin it, and you can see the different angles, or you can hold the shift key and turn it, shift middle mouse wheel. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the rest of these up, and then we'll continue. All right, so I've 3D moved all of the bolt patterns to a height 3 inches above it. And if I turn my object layer back on, you can see it. If I hold shift and push the middle mouse wheel, I can rotate it, and you'll notice that the view cube moves as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these objects and I'm going to extrude them. Now before I do, I need to join these shapes. So in order to get these to work, what I'm going to need to do is to make these shapes from individual lines into a continuous boundary. And the way I can do that is with the region command. So I can type in region, and then I can put a box around it and hit enter. And what that'll do is it'll create a shape out of that. And I can do the same thing. Region, enter. And I'm doing them separately. I don't know if it'll group them if I do them all together. If you go and you select with a blue window, then it will only select what's completely within it. All right, so now these are extrudable as solids. And so what we'll do is we'll extrude down 1.25 the shaft of the bolt. And so we can say extrude, or we could say press pull. Let's try press pull. We'll click and bring that down. Nope. Extrude. Enter. And we'll say 1. Enter. So that does work. And then we can extrude these up the other direction, 0.25. So we can say extrude, select that, hit enter, and then go up 0.25. And then remember that they're separate, and so we want to union them. So we'll say union, and then we can select these two shapes, and it'll fuse them together. So again, it's extrude, and then we can select this, and we can do more than one at once. Hit enter, type in 1, and then extrude. We'll go the other way. 0.25. And we can change the visual style. And you can work it if you've got a decent graphic card. Extrude. Enter when you're done selecting. 1 inch. Uh-oh. Undo that. One inch. And then the other way, 0.25. Then we'll union these so that they stay together. And when I union them, I union one bolt at a time. Okay, so that completes the top half of the exercise, and then to do the bottom half, it's pretty much the same except in reverse. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this geometry back to a top view. And we made a second copy of it over here. And so what we can do is we can just clean this geometry up just like we did the other one. And then we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to go down in the other direction for it. Now, again, I needed to put these on the nuts and bolts layer so that I can turn them off. And so to do that, I can just click on these things. And then put it on the nuts and bolts layer. If you don't do it, it's not a huge deal. It just makes it a little bit easier. And so I'm going to put these geometries on the nuts and bolts layer. Okay, so I've put these on the nuts and bolts layer. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off that layer. And then I'm going to make the object layer active. And I'm going to extrude these in the other direction. So I'm going to go to an isometric view. And then I'm going to come over here. And I'm going to extrude these in the other direction. Now it looks like I missed one. So I'm going to put that on the nuts and bolts layer. And it'll disappear because that layer is turned off. And then what I'll do is I will press pull this down. And actually I want to go up on this one because, let's see here. Let's press pull this one first. 1.75. Enter. And then let's press pull this one. 0.12. Perfect. Union them. Turn on the layer for the nuts and bolts so you can see it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move these down with the 3D move command. And so I'm going to turn off the object layer. And I'm going to make the nuts and bolts layer active. And then I'm going to move them with 3D move. And so we'll say 3D move. Hit enter. Grab the rocket, and then we'll go down 3. And for some reason it doesn't take the geometry with the circular, so I'm going to do it again. 3D move. Arg. And then I'm just going to remove this part by holding shift or clicking on it. There we go. Enter, rocket, down, 3. And so that's the geometry that I want. There are some quick ways to do this rather than doing it over and over again. I could do one, make it into a region, and then array it. That would save quite a bit of time. But at this time, I'm just going to pause and 3D move all of these down 3 inches. Okay, so we've gone through and we've 3D moved these down 3 units, and then it's very similar to the other type of extrusion. Now again, we need to create regions because you cannot extrude a single line. I mean, you can do it, but you'll get sort of like a spider web kind of a thing, and it doesn't look like a spider web in conceptual. It looks like a spider web in 2D wireframe. So if you see this, that's not going to work because it's not going to be a solid. It'll work for visualization, but for 3D prototyping, what we need to do is create regions. And so what we'll do is we'll say region, and then we'll just put a box, enter, right click, repeat, do it again, enter. And this one's already a region. Okay, so now that we've created them as regions, what we're going to do is we're going to press pull them, and we're going to go with a thickness of 0.25. And so I'm going to turn on my other layer, my object layer, so you can see that. And then I'm going to say press pull, hover, and press pull can be a little more difficult to use. So we're going to use extrude. We'll grab these, hit enter, and then we'll say 0.25. And we'll do that repeatedly. Enter to end the selection set, 0.25. And then if we shade them, you'll see the holes aren't there. So we'll have to subtract those. And so we'll say subtract. Select the large piece, hit enter, and then the smaller piece. Repeat. Enter. Large piece, enter, small piece. Now that one I didn't get it because I tried to subtract 2 of the same pieces. All right, and there's one more, shift middle mouse wheel. Okay, so if we take a look at this exercise, the last part would be to kind of center them on top of each other. And so the way to do that is to draw a line from the center here straight up. And if you get the plus Z like that, you're in great shape. And so I'm going to say, let's go 4 inches. We'll hit escape. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to move the one on top of the other. So we'll say move, select it, hit enter. And then we're going to move it from the center to the end point. And I've got my O snaps on. And so now I've got the parts orientated properly. I can go to the title block. And what I can do is create a viewport for that. And so what I'll do is I'll go down to my viewport layer. And I'll say View, Viewport, One Viewport. I'll double click in that viewport, and then I'll change that to a southeast isometric view. And I'll center it in there. All right, I'm going to leave the 2D geometry just like that. I'll double click outside here and put my name on the title block. And I'll save the file. Save them as your initials. All you really have to do is change the access to your initials. And that completes exercise 6, 3D assembly.